Okay. Okay. Admit. Resume recording. Okay, we're recording now, so everybody be on your best behavior. And oh wait, there's Chedva. I have to admit Chedva. Hello. Hold on, I have to. There it is. See, as the host, I can rename your box.
And what did you rename it?
So it's Vivian. And I could change mine to be the butcher.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a screen here because let's see. Share. Let's do this. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, and I'm just going to keep the participant box open in case somebody else comes in, because now I have to, soon we'll get used to a password and then I don't have to do the waiting room, but now, right now. So one of the beauties of Bereishit is that like you could really sink your teeth into the text here. And there's so much that, you know, we could really get going. And like it's almost like there's too much. It's like too much of a good thing. So what I want to do is, and this is on a shiur I read, based on a shiur I read a number of years ago, is we're going to look at the story of Kayin and Hevel. Pretty good, right? You know, so we say that there's no fights like a family fight. Well, it has its basis in the Bible. So. If you have a chumash, if you want to use a chumash using the stone chumash, it's the beginning of chapter 4, which is on page 18. And I have the text here on the page as well. And I have another medrash as well we're going to look at. And a few other things, which I don't have I didn't share the text, but I'm just going to share with you sort of outside. Now, of course, leading up to here, there was a lot that happened. You know, in the first 3 chapters, it's like, wow, I mean, like, I'm not sure you could jam much more. Creation of the world, which takes a couple of dozen verses, versus, you know, let's say the Mishkan, which takes up 300 something psukim, and God could create the world in 23 verses. You know, we can't. And then you have, of course, two sort of notions of creation. If you want to read the Lonely Man of Faith and Adam 1, Adam 2, etc. And then you have Adam and Chava, who, of course, then they have an encounter with the Nachash, the snake, and of course I don't know if you know this. There's a minhag. It's brought down in the Matei Ephraim. There's a minhag that women who are pregnant should bite off the tip of the esrog on Hoshana Rabbah, and that will guarantee a good pregnancy. I promise you, it doesn't work. Okay, a good delivery, because and there's a hiratz that says because the fruit that they ate from was an esrog, and since, look, God, I've had this beautiful esrog and I didn't eat it the whole sukkah. I was so tempted to eat it. I've never been tempted to bite the esrog ever, but I was so tempted and I didn't do it. Look, and in the merit of that, and since the punishment for that sin was difficult labor, so in the merit of that, let me have easy labor. Okay. You know, if that's your thing, if that's your cup of tea, then go ahead, because to hate. Otherwise, you know, they got in trouble. They get kicked out. And if you believe this was in real time, it's really not a lot of time has elapsed. You know, it's created right before Shabbos, and then Shabbos, and then next thing you know, they're kicked out, and they're kicked out of the garden. So the end of the previous chapter is, and they're kicked out, and you're going to sweat of your brow, you're going to eat bread, you're going to have difficulty in labor, all that. And then Hashem gave them clothing, and that's how the 3rd chapter ends. So now we have the 4th chapter. Viha Adam. It's funny that even though that in the previous line, in the end of the 3rd chapter, in the second to last line, it says that Adam, Vayikra ha'adam shem ishto Chava, Even though he gives her a name, he calls her Chava because she was the mother of all living beings, Chava. But he's still called Ha'adam. It doesn't say Vayikra Adam, like Adam was his name, the man. And it's interesting to look at when actually that takes place. But here also in the beginning of chapter 4, Viha Adam. And this figure, this individual, this whatever you want to call him, he Yadaz Chava Ishto. So then he is with his wife. Vatahar Vatelet es Kayin Vatomer Kanisi Ish es Hashem. As happens in the Bible, you look at somebody and they get pregnant and then they have a baby in the same verse. That's what happens. It's not that easy, right? It's like, especially in Bereishit, you could skip over 900 years in a half a verse. But here, so he knew her, she becomes pregnant, she gives birth to Kayin, Vatomer Kanisi Ishas Hashem. So before we do anything further, what's unusual about this pasuk? Feel free to unmute and speak up on Zoom. It's nice. I do miss the interaction. It's hard. I know it's hard on Zoom, but we have to try our best. But like, what strikes you? Certainly, with everything that we know about how children are named in the Bible, if I would say it like that, if you were naming a child in the Bible, how would you write this pasuk? Like that.
Well, you name a child after he's born, not while you're pregnant, typically.
Okay.
Meaning she's already giving birth to Kain,
right?
And he already has a name. Correct.
So it's like, normally it's Vatelet Bain, Vatikra et Shemo, whatever, because of whatever. Right? So that's what Yafita did. Beautiful. And here it says like, no, she gives birth to Kain, and then she gives the reason saying, I have acquired a man with Hashem. Which, by the way, so if you just read the straight up the straight up translation of that, if you read that literally, it's a little creepy, right? I have acquired a man with Hashem. So you could read that in a lot of different ways, and I'm sure people have a lot of fun with that. But in actuality, this gives rise to the notion that the Gemara says that there are three partners in creation. There's husband, there's wife, and then there's God, or maybe that's the wrong order, but that's what it takes. But here it is, because Kanisi Ish es Hashem. And by the way, it's also Ish. You know, I don't know if you would call a baby boy Ish, but here it's talking about in the male form. Very male dominated. There's no question about it. In other words, I wonder what would happen if she would have had a girl first. So my wife has a friend who married a Sephardic boy. Her married name is El Yishmarini. I mean, like, it doesn't get more Sephardic than that. And she had, I think 5 girls, like us, then had a boy, and then had another girl. And every time when she would call the mother-in-law and say, you know, we had a baby and it was a girl, so what do you have? You have a girl? The response was the same every time. May the next one be a boy. And I can't even tell you how many times I've heard all kinds of wacky things like that, but I wouldn't change it for anything. But it's just like this male and it's always like men. It could be that there were girls born. Well, there had to be. Right, there had to be. We'll see in a medrash in a minute. There were girls born, but I don't know. I don't know what happened. So here you go. See, Vatar Vatel V'Tamar Kanisi Ish es Hashem. I have gained a male child with the help of the Lord. That's the translation of the Sepharia here. Okay. Next pasuk. Vatosef laledes es achiv es Hevel. How do you translate that?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Back to verse 1. Maybe, she's saying, going through childbirth, the Lord helped me. Not necessarily the fact, how childbirth is so difficult and you usually need drugs and whatever.
Right. I mean, that some of the Mepharshim definitely point that out, is that she's reflecting on, after all, if we look at it in context, what she was just told in the previous chapter was that, you know what, it's going to be hard to have kids. Now, I don't think anybody will disagree with this here. When it says it's hard to have kids, it wasn't talking only about the birthing process. I think it was talking about their whole life. Right? Like, And again, in a matter of seconds, in biblical time, she's going to go through hell, right?
Also, the Torah's skipping several steps. They're going from birth to this one's a shepherd, this one's a farmer.
Right. Yes. I didn't even get to that yet. But that's, in other words, Kayin at least gets his own sort of birth verse.
And
He
why would
gets
she
his own,
name her
okay,
son
she
Hevel?
was, what, Shelley?
Why would she name her son Hevel?
Oh, so let's see. We got to figure this out. There's a lot to go on here. Now, but Vatosef, so Kayin gets his own verse and he gets a reason for his name. What does Hevel get? Hevel gets a half a verse, and it's sort of like, we have some lovely parting gifts for you. Thanks for being on our show. When the guest host, he gives you the walk off stage handshake. When he shakes your hand, well, one used to be able to shake someone's hand, and then you grab their elbow at the same time, and you're like, oh, thank you for being on our show, like that, okay? But so without looking at a translation, just translate this for me. Vatosef laledes es achiv es havel. Without looking at translation, how would you translate that? If you had to write a translation.
Are they
He
twins?
was added.
All right, I hear two things. Somebody said he was added or he's used twins. Who said what?
I'm saying
said-
that it looks like it's a continuous birth. There's no break.
Correct. So that's definitely one way to read this. Vatosef laledes es hevel, that it could, childbirth was so hard, she had no idea that they were having twins. Now, that's not universally accepted, but that is one way. That's, like, oh my God, we have the first kid. It's like almost like they used up all their energy and all their wisdom on the first kid, and we gave him a name. Oh my God, hello. And then, like, before you know it, yeah, hello. There's another one coming. And she's like, well, what's this? Vatosef laledes es achiv es havel. And then Vatosef means then she added on. And here it says, and then. Here in the art scroll, it says, and additionally she bore. Okay, he was like a nothing, which, as Shelley said correctly, if you would ask what is the definition of the word hevel, right? What's the definition of the word hevel? We just read in Koheles a zillion times.
Like nothingness.
Nothing. It's like poof.
Sheker
Hevel,
achen
Hevel,
behevel
Makol Hevel, it's
yofi.
nothing. So could you imagine if your parents named you nothing? Like, if you named you, oh yeah, you too, you also, okay? The level of psychological trauma that exists in these biblical families is just astronomical. I mean, they got no soap opera, no miniseries has anything on these stories, I'm telling you, okay? But it's setting up for, this is the first, we're exposed now to the very first nuclear family. And the first nuclear family has a lot of issues, okay? This is their bubble, if we can use a contemporary word, right? This is their bubble. If I would take a dictionary here, here. I have a Shiur dictionary, right? Remember these, we used to go to school. So I'm just gonna I don't know, I have no idea what it's gonna say, but I'm gonna look up the word Hevel, and it's gonna say, Dalet Heva, okay. Hevel, it says, Hoval, this is modern Hebrew. Oh no, here, Hevel, breath, vapor, or vanity. And it comes because when the Gemara discusses Hevel, it's like a gas that you can't see and it dissipates very quickly. But it's so not impactful that it doesn't even make an impression upon us, okay? So there are some, by the way, that suggest that Kayin was born already in Gan Eden. And Vatosef laledes es achiv es havel, again, then you get into the whole time questions. And then after Gan Eden, maybe when she thought that her life was over, and she had another child, which would tell you that they're not twins. We don't know necessarily that they're twins. We don't have a proof. But Vatosef laledes means she could have, at the same birthing process, had another child, or maybe sometime later she had Hevel. So here's what I want to share with you what the Ramban says. The Ramban, on this pasuk, again, I didn't share the text with you because I'll just share with you outside. I'm going too far. We're only in chapter 4. And here, like you could spend a lot of time just studying Sefer Bereishit and Parshas Bereishit. The Ramban says, because it says that she here. Go back to the first pasuk. Vatomer kanisi ish es Hashem. Say that 10 times fast. Vatomer kanisi ish es Hashem. I have acquired a man with God. Okay, so the Ramban says, Keshebara osi ve'es ishi hu levado baranu. He says, when I was born, or Adam, Chava wasn't really born. Adam wasn't really born, which, by the way, we can never really fault their parenting methods because they had no example to follow. That's something we always have to keep in mind. They had no idea what it's like to be a parent because, they were just kind of thrown here. It's always the question, like, were they born as grown-ups? Did they grow up? I mean, these are questions you could drive yourself crazy thinking about. But the Ramban says that when I or my man, Ishi, which means my husband, my man, the man, when we were created, he said, we were created alone. So that's Rashi. Ramban quotes Rashi. He says, Vahanachon li, and the Ramban says, but what's proper to me, what it seems is, She'amra, Habein hazeh yeli kinyan laHashem. So here are the words. That's why if you were saying, I have created or made a male child, just think of Luca Brazzi when he says, may he be a masculine child, right? From Godfather 1. But if he says that, like, what is the way you would say that? You would say kaniti. Kaniti means to acquire. Liknot means to purchase, to take into ownership something that was previously not yours and now it is yours. That's called a kinyan, right? So when you sell the chametz and hold the handkerchief, that's a kinyan. When you get married, that's a kinyan. When you buy something and you take it and you have a contract, that's a kinyan. So kinyan seems to be an unusual word that's used. Kaniti ish es Hashem, like I have acquired, like did I purchase it from God? Did I somehow take it from God? But it's not kanisi ish me Hashem. That should be if you're saying it's an acquisition, I have acquired a man from God. It should be kaniti ish or kaniti bain me Hashem, from God. But we're not saying that. We're saying kaniti ish et Hashem. That's why the grammar doesn't make a lot of sense here, if you're sensitive to the words here. And that's what's bothering the Ramban. And the Ramban says, no, habein hazeh yeli kinyan la Hashem. He's like, kanish ish, I have this child, this man, is going to give a kinyan for God. Is going to be an acquisition for God. Ki kasher namus yeheh bimkomenu la'avod es bareinu. Because when I die, or when we die, there will be someone now to serve God. Because they saw their whole purpose now is to serve God in this world. There's nobody else. There's no one to talk to. It must have been a lonely conversation. I wonder what the dinner table was like for Adam and Eve. What'd you do today? It's like it's kind of strange.
For dinner, we're having apples.
Yeah, right. So we had that last night. It didn't work out well. He says, but now it's good. But if our purpose is to serve God, again, they're living this idyllic existence where they have direct communication with God, and their whole purpose is to convene with God. So they're already thinking about. And I guess now because they ate from the tree of knowledge and they understand that nobody's going to live forever, and there is this concept of death, so they have to think about succession. They say that the first thing that any successful leader does is pick a successor. That's the best thing you could do, is when you get into a position, it's fine, who's going to take over after you, right? That's one of the greatest things you can do. So here, the Ramban says, no, this is going to be a kinyan because when we die, he's going to serve God. And he says the same thing as Unkelos, because Unkelos says, Kadam Hashem. He gets different textual proofs. And he says the textual proof is saying that this is what's going to be in our place after God. So meaning for God after us. If that's the case, then the Ramban says we can understand the verbiage when it comes to Hevel. He says, Hasheni Hevel, he says, Kikinyan Adam la Hevel Dama. And he says this is something sort of a sod, a mystical type of deep-lying secret. He says because that the second one, the kinyan, the acquisition that a person does make or that gives himself to God, he says lahevel dama. He says it's so fleeting. And again, he doesn't explain exactly what he means, but he says, I don't want to go into it. That's why they didn't give Hevel a name. In other words, there is some certain significance to the name given to Hevel. However, it's not something they wanted to go into because maybe they were thinking about their own mortality. Okay, fine. So that's sort of difficulty number one. But already you can see, I think what the Torah is definitely setting up for us is a situation where there is a conflict. You may not recognize it as a conflict right away in the verses, but when you read it carefully, you realize that the Torah itself is setting up for us a situation where it's not fair, it's inequitable. And we see the same thing. Look, we looked at how when Leah, we're going to get to it, I don't know if I'll do it again this year, but when Leah names all the children, her emotions come so clearly through the way she names those boys. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, maybe now he'll look at me, maybe now he'll talk to me, maybe now he'll like me, maybe now, but maybe, okay? And it's already the conflict is built up in the naming. Here, already there is a tug of war between Kayin and Hevel, and nothing has happened yet. Why? Because look at how Kayin was named, and look at what he represents, Kanisi as Hashem, he's going to be for God, and then it's, oh yeah, and she also said Hevel. This is the other one. And by the way, does this not happen in families all the time? Where there's sort of like a golden child and then there's the other one? That's kind of how my daughters feel in our house. But my daughter went off to call. Okay, she couldn't take it anymore. I was talking about nuclear families. So she's like, oh, he's going to start talking about me. So she left. But I don't blame her. But that's, do we not do that? Of course we do that. Okay. So before anything has happened, again, just by reading 1.5 verse, you already can see the tension building. Now, of course, we know the story, but further tension is now, as Yafit pointed out, that like Hevel doesn't even get his own pasuk, and then like they just skip their whole life, and then all of a sudden tells you about their occupation. He Hevel roet son, the Kayin haya oved adama. Now, what speaks to you here in this verse? There's no right or wrong here. I just want to hear what you think. Oh, the order is flipped. Okay. So what does that mean? Eliane said the order is flipped. Okay. Eliane is brilliant, by the way. I hope everybody had the chance to hear her beautiful Dvar Torah that she gave on Simchas Torah here. She doesn't like the attention. I like giving it the attention, but she doesn't like giving the attention. But what are you going to do? It's a bad habit I have of giving her attention. The order is switched. If we're going in age order, the Torah listed Kayin and then Hevel. So maybe the Torah should list the occupation of Kayin first and then the occupation of Hevel, if that's the direction we're going. Or maybe it's as simple as, well, it's the same pasuk as Hevel. So like while we're talking about Hevel, we did the foil method. First, outer, inner, last, whatever it is. Okay, so since we're talking about Hevel, talk about Hevel, but it's not like the Torah to do that. The Torah usually likes to be successful. Answer the first question first, and the second question second. But right away, what is it telling you?
Is there any priority given to the different jobs that they had in terms of one being a shepherd and one working the land?
So I think maybe that's also maybe subconsciously or preemptively, or it's a what's the word they use in film, what?
Foreshadowing?
Foreshadowing, yeah, thank you, ma'am. Foreshadowing, it's like foreshadowing that, oh yeah, one is going to be better than the other.
This is the story of Bereishit, though. If you go from Kayin and Hevel to Abraham, to Yitzchak, to Yaakov, this is the Genesis story, the birth order, Ephraim and Manasseh. It just goes on, where the second becomes more important than the first.
Right, or I would rephrase that and I would say the first is not always important just because he's the first. Like that. Because it's not always the second, it's just always not the first. And maybe the Torah is already, you're right. So this is Masa Avos Siman Labanim, even though we haven't gone to Avos yet. Masa Avos Siman Labanim only starts with Avraham. But again, this is foreshadowing, exactly. But, you could read this 1,000 times, but really what the Torah is setting us up in the text to say that there is inequality. That maybe there's inequality the way the parents treated Kayin versus the way they treated Hevel, and maybe the way the Torah looks at Hevel versus the way the Torah looks at Kayin, and then it goes and it happens. By the way, and that is a self-fulfilling prophecy here, because what happens in Pasuk 3, Vayhi miketzi yamim, vayavei Kayin mipri adama min chala Hashem. Cain brought an offering to God from the fruit of the soil. Now, I brought out Rav Hirsch, but it's actually, it's too long. I'm not going to read through it because I have another piece from Rav Bazak that I want to share with you. But if you have time, if you want to study this a little further, I would read the commentary of Rav Shamshon Fol Hirsch. It's about a page and a half or so, and he goes through, really this part of the pasuk about their occupations, why one was considered sort of more desirable, one not. What should they have been focusing on? Tson, Adama. We're going to see that in a medrash in a second. And it says, so Kayin brings, by the way, notice, order switched again. Kayin and then Hevel. So it starts off Kayin, then Hevel, Hevel, then Kayin, now Kayin, then Hevel. Kayin brings the fruits, and Hevel, Hevi Gamhu. Oh, here we go again. When you see the words Hevi Gamhu in Pasuk Dalet in verse 4, what automatically comes to your mind? To me, Vatosef Laledes, right? Oh, he was also born. Oh, he also brought. He's an also ran. He's a bridesmaid, never a bride. The Hevel, Hevi Gamhu mi Becharos Sono umichel vehen. Vayisha Hashem el Hevel ve'minchaso. And God likes this. Ve'el Kayin ve'el minchaso lo sha'ah. Vayichar lekayin ma'od vayipilu panov. So Hevel also brings, and by the way, what happens? The order switches again. God likes Kayin. God likes Hevel. Doesn't like Kayin's. So if you go back, if you would just sketch out, if you would chart the order of the verses, it's Kayin, then Hevel, then Kayin, then Kayin, then Hevel, then Kayin. It's a neat little pattern here, right? Now, we could go into why God doesn't like Kayin's offering. We discussed this on Shabbos Shuva. I think it's definitely worth repeating because not everybody here was here for there. But when the pasuk says ve'el Kayin, here, follow my cursor. If you can see my cursor, ve'el Kayin ve'el minchaso lo sha'ah, that Kayin and to his offering, God did not turn. Now, by the way, the verbiage of the pasuk is very clear. God first did not turn to Kayin, and then to his offering. It's not like, it doesn't say God didn't accept his offering. God didn't accept Kayin, and then he didn't accept his offering or as part of the package. But what he didn't accept was Kayin and his offering. When you give something, you're giving your whole self. But what we mentioned on Shabbos Shuva is that we say, Yesh shekona olam haba b'sha'a achas, that it's possible to acquire the world to come. We brought two different Gemaras. It's both on Daf Yud Zayin and Daf Yud Ches, two different Gemaras, one after another on Amud Aleph that tell that phrase where you can acquire the world to come b'sha'a achas, which normally would say in one instant. The story of Chanina ben Tradion. They're burning him, and he's and the executioner gets accepted into heaven, a heavenly voice, sha'achas. So my Rebbe always told us, he says that the way you read that is you have to look at the etymology in the Chumash the first time it appears. And this is the first time in Chumash that the word sha'ah appears. And what it means is, and to Kayin and to his mincha, he didn't turn. He says, you want to get olam haba, all you need is sha'achas. You need one turn. You just have to make a slight turn. If you turn your direction, your trajectory is entirely different. So if you change one thing in your life, that's how you can get olam haba. That's how you can become closer to God. So that was a Shabbos Shuva drasha, and that's a whole other story. But here, in its literal sense, V'elkayin min chasal lo sha'ah, and vayichar lekayin ma'od vayiplu panav. So this is also a foreshadowing that maybe while it might be a natural emotional reaction, it's not always the best reaction to be angry. Now, what is he angry about? Well, it was more than ignored. He got rejected. Now, let me ask you this. Thank God you're not dating anymore. Like, you're out of that world, right? Isn't it nice? Miriam, like, they're such newlyweds. They still have the just married sign on the back of their car. It's so cute. Why did wash it away? No, it's going to stay forever. You should always be just married, always.
I still have honey every single Shabbos for generation.
Okay. We have honey until Hanukkah. We do it until Hanukkah. We somehow adopted that, but it's nice. Why not? Plus, you have so much honey. Like, how are you going to use it? So when a person's dating, there's one thing. Let's say you're dating somebody and you're dating seriously, and the person that you're dating rejects you. But not only does he reject you, but then like goes out with your sister and marries your sister or your best friend, or fill in the blanks. Okay. So is the anger about the rejection? Is the anger about the other person that was picked and not you? Or is it a combination of both? There's a lot to play around with here. There's a lot to think about. And there's a lot of emotional baggage we can unpack here. But who knows? But it just says Vayichar l'Kayin me'od. We don't know. So this is where the Mefarshim fill it in for us. What exactly caused him distress? And Vayiplu panov. So his face falls. Vayiplu panov means the Targum says Iskavishu apohi. It's like he became completely defeated. He's completely defeated, like he gave up. So there's a couple of things.
Just be plain old jealousy.
Right, plain old jealousy. That's in the South. They call that
so,
plain old jealousy is Kayin and Hevel. That's the paradigm of jealousy is Kayin and Hevel, and that's the traditional way of reading it.
Maybe it's also, because I think we said this before, how Kayin was meant to be a successor to Adam and Chava, so his job basically just got rejected. So his whole essence is now destroyed in one shot.
Beautiful. So what Miriam said, for those who, I don't know if you heard, that she said that if what we're saying is that Kayin's if he understands his whole purpose is to succeed Adam and Chava in the service of God, and he's rejected in that role, he sees himself as a complete failure, then what am I doing wrong? Like, what am I supposed to do? Now, you might say, oh, well, if I had an emotional life coach and I would tell you that anger is not the way and you have to try again, and, it's not everything happens the first time, all these things that we as parents say, which, by the way, his parents didn't do that for him because no one ever did that for them. His parents are completely not involved. They are not helicopter parents. They are disappearing parents. We don't hear from them ever, okay? Not until after the story. So they're not involved in this at all. Two things, anger and he becomes despondent. Anger and he gives up. The perfect examples of things that we tell our kids not to do, even though that might be your inclination, right? We say, Ezehu Gibor HaKovesh Es Yitzro, who's considered strong if you could conquer your inclination. So one of the hardest things to do is to hold back anger. Okay, they say to bite your tongue or walk away. They say that the Chafetz Chaim, when he would get angry, he would walk into the corner and start talking to himself, and he would say, "Yisrael Meir Nishken Kas, Yisrael Meir Nishken Kas, Yisrael Meir, don't get angry." His name was Yisrael Meir Kagan. Don't get angry, don't get angry, don't get angry. Okay. Now let's go on the screen and let's see what happens further. Now we know what happens, but you have to read it carefully in the pasuk. Okay. Vayomer Hashem el Kayin, lama charalach v'lama naflu panecha. So God addresses both aspects of his reaction. Why are you angry? Or why did this cause anger? And why did you become despondent? Why did you give up? Why do you feel defeated? So God is like the original therapist here. This is the first... it's not the first time, because the first time we saw was with Adam and Chava when they messed up, and he's like, "Where are you? What do you mean, where are you? And you know exactly where I am." That's one form of therapy. But here he's actually asking the direct question. He says to Kayin, "What?" And I don't know if he's expecting an answer. Why do you get angry about? And God, so asking a question or giving, even if it's a silent or sort of backhanded rebuke, is only good if you give a constructive solution, if you give a way to come out of your current situation. So the next pasuk says, "Halo im tetiv se'es, ve'im lo se'tiv lepesach chatas rovetz, ve'elecha teshukaso, ve'ata timshal bo." Surely, if you do right, there is uplift. I don't know. I don't know who writes their translations, but let me read you the article translations. And he says, surely, if you improve yourself, you will be forgiven. But if you don't improve yourself, sin rests at the door. Its desire is towards you, yet you can conquer it. It's kind of a weird pep talk. It's a weird pep talk, which, sometimes as parents, when we try to give advice to our children, and afterwards you're like, I might have said the absolute worst thing ever possible. Because you know what? There's no manual. And each kid has a different manual. So we don't know what to say. We have no idea what's going on in their heads. And we say, well, why are you angry? And why are you depressed? If you do the right thing, you're going to be fine. But if you don't, you're going to screw up even more. So I'm not so sure that that's necessarily helpful advice. And certainly Kayin either didn't get it, didn't accept it, didn't want to accept it. We don't know. We don't know what happens here. And who speaks like this? And sin, it crouches at your door. So again, you could spend weeks and weeks on the Mefarshim parsing out each word of here. I'm just trying to give you the bigger picture here and surely the sin is crouching at your door, but you can do it. Atatim Shabal, you can conquer sin. You can do this, Kayin. He's giving a little bit of a pep talk. Now, by the way, maybe God never had kids either. This is God's first crack at it. I don't know. I mean, if you could really, personify God in that sense, which we try not to do. So this brings us to the climax of the story in verse 8. Vayomer Kayin el Hevel achiv, vahi bi'asam basadeh, vayokom Kayin el Hevel achiv v'yahargehu. Which, of course, is one of the most bizarre psukim in the Torah, okay? Because there's so much that is not said, right? So what strikes you about this verse?
You never even see them talking to each other.
There's no conversation. It's a one-way conversation. Vayomer el Hevel achiv, vayomer Kayin el Hevel achiv. And what did he say to him? We don't know.
I don't know.
Torah does not reveal to us. What, Nancy? I'm sorry? ... Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, So maybe the point is it doesn't matter what he said to him because of what follows. What follows is Vayihi bi'osam basadeh vayakam Kayin el Hevel achiv v'yargeu. And it was that they happened to be in the field, and Kayin gets up. El Hevel, by the way, notice the focus, Hevel achiv. The Torah is very clear. The Torah is very, very crystal clear about saying that he killed his brother. This is a family that is now going to go through trauma from which they will not recover.
Because this is so unprecedented, because everything is so new, because it's the beginning of the world, we also have no idea whether or not he intended to hurt him versus kill him. We don't know because there's no conversation.
Correct.
There's so little it's given. There's so many blanks to fill in. Everyone always makes it out as, he hated him, he was jealous, and he killed him. And we don't know whether or not that was his intent.
I'll share you what some of the Mefarshim say in a second. But I just finished reading this book. I really like social psychology books, as if I'm going to fix anything. And they did a study of crime that took place in Chicago over a decade. And they thought that if they could sort of track the stats and try to get there before it escalates to those situations, that they would be able to reduce the crime rate, which, by the way, they were very successful in doing, and I'll explain what I mean. Is that you would think the traditional thinking in Chicago law enforcement is that most of these deaths of, let's say, youth between the ages of 18 and 35 or 15 and 35, murders were gang-related or targeted killings. And while there were a number that fall into that category, the majority did not. And most of these cases, they realized when they analyzed every single murder over a period of years, is that it started an argument on a basketball game or, a fight over a girlfriend where nobody had any intention ever to kill someone else, but the situation escalated so quickly out of control. So what this program that was instituted was called CFB, was that they would sort of pre-coach young men who had no father figures, and they would tell them how to sort of de-escalate situations, and it actually did create a reduction in crime in that stat. Now, what the long-term effects are, I don't know. But here, exactly, we don't know what happened. Did he intend to kill him? I don't know. All it says is that he says something to him, which, in other words, would the pasuk make any less sense without the first part of it? If it just said, that they were in the field and he happens upon Hevel and he kills him. The first part of the pasuk has no bearing on the rest of it. It adds nothing to the party, right? We don't know. So that's what bothers the Mefarshim. So I'll read what some of the Mefarshim say. Rashi, right? So what Dina was alluding to is the traditional thinking of Rashi, because we're raised on cornflakes and milk and Rashi. Okay. Nichnas imo b'divrei riv. He started a fight with him. And he wanted to create a situation where he would, start an argument and maybe have even a justifiable homicide, fratricide. Evan Ezra. Evan Ezra says, what did he say to him? He told him about all his rebuke and rejections from God about his offerings. And this causes an argument. Dasakanim says the same thing. The Ramban says, and he quotes Rashi, he quotes Evan Ezra, but al dati shehudavak im vayhi beyosamasada. He says, no, this really is connected to the next part of the pasuk. When I said it adds nothing to the party, the Ramban says just the opposite. The Ramban says, no, that's the pretense to get him into the field. Ki omar lo vayomer kayin and hevel achiv is, what he said to him is, let's go for a walk. What he said to him is, hey, let's go out to the field. And then the Torah says, and while they were in the field, he killed him. It was absolutely, according to the Ramban, it was absolutely premeditated, but he wanted to do it in the Sadeh. Why? And again, the Ramban following through with what he said earlier with the birth of Kayin, that if Kayin was to be the successor of his parents and to serve God, he figured this guy's not serving God. I can't have that. So I'm going to kill him secretly. We'll take him out in the field, and then I will build the world through me. Because he never thought there would be anybody else. It's going to be through me. Okay? And the Ramban has another answer. But we see here that difference in the Mefarshim is that they were, it was premeditated, it wasn't premeditated, whatever it might be. Let me share with you now this medrash. This is just also a great example about what it means to learn medrash. So, can you see this? Do you see it on my screen that I switched?
Yeah. Okay,
fine. So, the medrash, and Rashi alludes to this medrash, and the medrash says, what were they talking about? So look at this. Vayomer Kayin and Hevel achiv. Al ma hayu midainin. What were they talking about? Obviously, this is typical medrash. The Torah says they spoke about something, doesn't say what they spoke about. What are they really speaking about? So Amru bo v'nachlok es ha'olam. They said, let's divide up the world. After all, there's just two of us. Already, they're live for 20 minutes and already they're talking about the Yerusha. So they said, let's split up the world. Echad natal karkos, v'echad natal matalton. One said, I'll take all the land, and one said, I'll take all the movable objects. Dein am ha'ara da'askaim ala didi, v'dein am ramat is levesh didi. Dein am chalotz, v'dein am varach. Mitoch kach v'yakam kain al hevel achim v'hargeu. You can understand. He says, wait a minute. Okay, if I own all the property, then get off my property. Oh yeah? Well, what about what you're wearing and everything that you're holding? I own all the movable objects. That's mine. So they start arguing back and forth. Nobody has a place to be because you can't have movable objects without property, and you can't have property without anything on it. So they started fighting. Boom. Rabbi Shiur de Sichnin, the second opinion in the Medrash is, no, they weren't fighting about that. They both had land. They both had movable objects. And They're arguing about in whose shetach, in whose property, in whose domain will the Beis HaMikdash be built. Okay, because there is a Beis HaMikdash, right? I mean, obviously, the Beis HaMikdash always has to come. Okay, that's just me being cynical. But what does it mean they're arguing about the Beis HaMikdash? And they're fighting about it, and then I get the Beis HaMikdash, I get the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore they die. Look at the third opinion. Yehuda bar Ami Omar, Al Chava Harishona Hayimidanin. They're arguing about Chava Harishona, which means what? No, she died. So what are they talking about? So Amar Rav Huna, Ta'oma Yisera Nolda Im Hevel. Ze Omar Anin Nolda Shani Bechar, Vizem Anin Nolda Shanolda Imi. Some say that there was a twin girl that was born with Hevel, which, by the way, would tell you that then Kayin and Hevel were not twins. Kayin says, I'm the firstborn, I should get her. And Hevel says, no, she's my twin, I should get her. So what is the Medrash really? So this is in general, by the way, this is the classic Medrash teaching Medrash, where you can have a whole conversation about how do we deal with Medrash. What is Medrash? Is Medrash meant to be taken literally? Did this really happen, or is Medrash allegorical? I'm more in the latter category. I don't think Medrash is meant to be taken literally, because then we'd have a lot of difficulties, like Rivka being 3 years old and lifting up the stone, and all these types of things. You name it, you'll find a difficulty, okay? What is the Medrash really telling us here? 3 opinions in the Medrash. The Medrash is saying that when people kill one another, or when war happens, or when murder happens, it's probably most likely over one of 3 things. It's over money, karka versus metaltalin. It's over Beis HaMikdash, which is religion, or it's over love. It's over a girl, or it's over, romance or sexual desires, whatever it might be. And you say what the Medrash is laying the groundwork for us is that, historically speaking, the greatest arguments in the world, which led to the greatest violence in the world, are usually based and rooted in the same sort of core sins or core disagreements: money, religion, sex. That's what the Medrash is telling you. See, that's a way you learn Medrash. That's and it's a very modern approach. Everybody will say, no. Obviously, they were arguing about the Beis HaMikdash because they mentioned. I mean, I have a hard time believing that they were thinking about the Beis HaMikdash on day 6 of creation, whatever it was. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, if I'm wrong, then I'm a heretic. Okay, I'm fine. Put me in cherem. But I have a hard time believing that, and I think it makes much more sense when you look at it in this sort of in a whole manner, and you say, well, what's not going to happen? So I'll share with you. I'll finish with you this. By the way, so the let me share with this, and then we'll finish it up. So this new book I got, it's called. This is also very good, by the way. It's called Starting Point by Rabbi Amnon Bazak. Rabbi Bazak, who is one of the Rosh Yeshivas in Gush Etzion, one of the great modern biblical scholars that we have in the world, and he has on each parsha like 6 or 7 short text-based ideas, which would be perfect to share at the Shabbos table on a long Friday night and to discuss with the text and say, again, each one is not even a full page. And really, but something you could really sink your teeth into. I'm going to share with you one piece and you'll understand what I mean. Cain was the first person to offer a gift to God. Hevel only followed. In the course of time, it says he has the pasuk, he gave this, and he says there was a significant difference between the 2 offerings. The Lord paid heed to Hevel and to his offerings, but to Cain and his offering he paid no heed. So why did Hashem not turn to Cain's gift? Maybe the difference was the giver's approach. Cain's name plays on the word to create. When he was born, his mother said, I have gained, I have kaniti, a male child with the help of the Lord. Again, using that explanation. Chava expressed a sense of partnership with God in the birth of a child. Cain, bearer of this attitude, brought a gift from the fruits of the earth, as one might bring to a partner in a shared enterprise. He did not show the humility of the created to his creator. Hevel's name expresses the fleeting mortal nature of mankind. Man is like a breath, Adam Hevel Dama, which we said in Yizkor. His days are like a passing shadow. Hevel lives with the awareness that God gives all, and so he brings the choicest of the firstlings of his flock. The Torah values bringing the firstborn or the first fruit as an expression of God's primacy. So maybe there was a bit of arrogance in Cain's offering that he didn't give everything of himself. He gave him some of his stuff, but it didn't show like the complete sort of dedication to God. The differences between Kayin and Hevel go back to childhood. Cain was born in the Garden of Eden. Rashi reads the verse to mean Adam had known, it says Vayeda, he had known his wife in the past perfect when they were still in Eden. They wanted to eat from the tree of knowledge and became gods or godlike themselves. Hevel was born after Adam and Chava were exiled to parents well aware of their mortality and vulnerability. Perhaps this explains their choice of occupation. Cain worked the land, for the land gives a sense of stability and permanence. Hevel chose to be a shepherd with no fixed place on earth and an awareness that the land belongs to God. The Jubilee year, the Yovel, reinforces this value. But the land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. You are strangers resident with me. Pasuk in Vayikra. One who works the land must always be aware that the land belongs to God and that God alone is entitled to the first of its produce. Cain's gift does not recognize God's primacy, and it becomes clear why Hevel's gift was favored. So that's an explanation about the nature of the gifts. But again, I just wanted to share because I just got this yesterday, and I found this insight, and I think it's a wonderful. If you're looking for something to sink your teeth into, it's from Kodesh Press, and it's a 2-volume set which covers all books of the Chumash. Okay, maybe we can add it, Vivian, to the Haggadah collection.
Book? I'm sorry, what's the name of the book?
It's called Starting Point by Rabbi Amnon Bazak.
Okay, thank you.
When I send out the recording, I'll send a link to the book. I think so far what I've read, it's really, really nicely done, because sometimes when you read these long essays, like you could get lost in it and then your head starts spinning. But this, since they're so like concise and contained, it's really good. Let's just go back to the original text. And then we have, of course, the punishment. I don't need to get into the punishment of Kayin. Okay. He gets chased out, and he's here, and then he has family, and then there's this one. If you look at the 2 lines, look at this here now, verse 25. Go to Pasuk Chafei. If you're in the stone, it's on the end of chapter 4 on page 22. Pasuk Chafei, verse 25. Vayeda Adam od es ishto. Vateled bein vatikra shemoshes kishasli lakim zera acher tachas hevel ki harago Kayin. So given the framework that we set up, what does this pasuk teach you? If you had to sum up this pasuk in a couple of words, what would you say? I would say, lesson learned. Look at the formation of this pasuk. Adam, maybe they were afraid to have children. Because, by the way, there are a lot of grandchildren are born in between. Maybe they were afraid to have children because, if one kid killed the other one, like, geez, like who wants to bring anybody into in a world like this, okay? But, so it's almost like you sense this reluctance, but they did it anyway. Vayeda Adam odes ishto vateled bein. And here we find the traditional structure of the pasuk. They had a son, and then they called his name Shes. He wasn't predestined, preordained. She didn't vateled Shes, vateled bein. And then they called his name Shes. Why? Because God has provided me with something, with a replacement for Hevel had killed him. Maybe now they're getting a sense of, maybe we had a part, maybe we had a chelik in their dispute as well. And by the way, we like to say that we're without blame, but you know what? Our kids are every much a part of what we are. They are what we are, and we contribute everything to them, l'tova and l'ra. And I mean, how many times have you found yourself like as a parent and you say, "Oh my God, I have turned into my father," or "I've turned into my mother"? Like, "Oh my God, that's something my mother would say," like that. But here, I think this is a nice sort of like loop to circle it back together. That whereas it started, where it's so unusual the way the Torah records his birth, and here finally at the 3rd child, the way the birth is recorded, this is sort of quote unquote normal. Although this family and at this point is shattered and is anything but normal. There's so much more to say here. But again, this is the beauty of Bereishit, is we could sink our teeth into the text and we could really get something out of it. And there's a lot to learn here. So I'm so glad that we are back in business. Again, we'll continue in this format. Again, we are meeting live here in the shul as well. If anybody is up for it, we're by all means. more faces, more happy. So, but we'll continue on Zoom. And again, if you know anybody else you think that should want to join us, please spread the word. And as always, I'm recording this, and then I'll send out the link once I upload it for those who are, for whatever reason, if you're unable to make the class, then we will continue with this. So everybody have a great day. Nice to see you. Shana Tova, good in winter, good in Kvittel, and all those types of good things. We could say goodbye to everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes,
Thank you,
have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah.